Good morning, everybody. Um, Shalini and I decided that we would run this as a kind of common presentation. So we've taken the trouble today to come together and be in the same camera frame. It's feeling nice after working for so many years together on cultural activities, but then separated during the lockdown. It's a very nice feeling to feel that somehow we are back talking culture, doing culture in a common space. Um, so we're going to be talking we are taking turns to talk, and it's not something we've rehearsed. So there may be some overlaps, there may be some repetitions, there may be even some omissions. But as Ashley had, when he spoke to us, he said that the session, this 1.5 hour session, will be about 45 minutes for us to say what we have to say, and then we'll have 45 minutes of discussion after that. So we're hoping that these two places combined will then enable us to, in 1.5 hours, more or less competently encapsulate the work that we are doing and the way we think the work should be done. Yeah. I think the opening, Shalini will start. We'll keep taking turns to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Keval. Hi, uh, really good to be here and really good to be back doing something apart from just Zoom. So it was really good to come together and work this session out with Keval after a very long time of working individually only through internet. So this feels nice. Just a couple of weeks back when Ashley got in touch with the two of us to talk about our cultural experience at Delhi University and in terms of being involved in our different activities that we do with students. One of the questions that was bothering the two of us was how to make it relevant in for all of you in terms of institutional arrangements which are different on ground. But two things I think settled the worry that we had. For one, talking about differences also engages all of us. Looking at differences closely, looking at where we kind of, how we are different, how do we accept those differences and still move on. That itself becomes an area which provokes a lot of thought. And secondly, even though one is different and one accepts that dissimilarity, on the ground, an institution in terms of where it begins and where it aims to get at broadly really overlaps. So, with these two thoughts, one came into this session. Just some starting thoughts as well as disclaimers to begin with. Keval and I both teach in the same college at Delhi University, which is Kirori. Keval looks after theatre and has done for many years, setting up the cultural space at Kirorimal, not only in terms of theatre, but broadly the cultural space. And KM has a very, very rich history and tradition. And I also have come here as faculty, but both of us also studied at the same college. So Keval uh, teaches English, I teach chemistry. Both of us also did our undergrad as well as post graduation in English and chemistry, respectively, at Kirorimal College. And we were also part of the same cultural society that we now look after. So I came in through the music admission and was part of the music society. Keval at the time, Keval was a student. There were no ECA admissions, no cultural admissions, but he was, as a student, a part of theatre society. So therefore, when we come in with sharing our experiences, we are doing it from both ends. As students who benefited greatly as being a part of these cultural societies, then going over to the other side and now being faculty mentors or faculty advisors to the society we started off our careers or started off our student lives with. So we will be discussing and talking to you maybe from both the standpoints. Secondly, we are going to keep going back to theater and music and maybe a little bit of dance, though one completely understands that there are many, many other cultural forms. But we also would maybe privilege in a certain way, if that's the right word, uh, theater, music, and dance because of the collaborative nature. Many other forms like fine arts and debate and so on are very valuable also. But the collaborative essence of music, dance, and theater make it very valuable to any institutional setup. So I'll then now give this over to Keval.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that should hold true for all of us. What Shalini just said, reminding you, offering it as a disclaimer, but I would like to sometimes think of it as a claim rather than a disclaimer. I know very often working at KM, it makes it easier for me to remember my days as a student because I'm inside the college speaking to somebody at the office, and then through the window I see this long line of students out standing outside in the sun waiting to pay their fees or submit a form. And I then suddenly remember what it was like to be standing outside in that line, in that queue, and having someone from the college office saying, no, not now, come back later. And I'm privileged now as a faculty member standing inside. And I then speak to my colleague in the admin office and say, help him now, what is the problem? He said, no, 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 these people are always after me. I said, that poor guy's been standing. So suddenly I find that it's my memory of being dispossessed as a student that allows me to start asking questions of my own institution. Things that would be invisible to me become visible because I have to fall back on memory. Otherwise, I go into a college office, I get attended to right away. Somebody turns to me and says, oh, sir has come. Yes, can I help you? My work gets done quickly and I leave. And I think we always have to be conscious of the fact that we do not abuse the privileged positions we are in, even if they are accidental. So when we look at our work culturally, I gave an example which had nothing to do with culture except the culture of work, profession, workplace, and equity. But when we look at our work culturally, both Shalini and I constantly remember what was it that upset us as students. What we liked as students, we hope to preserve. But what as students we did not like, we hope to address those issues in our own functioning as faculty advisors, sometimes speaking for students the things they feel uncomfortable voicing to us because they'll think, oh, we are complaining. When we say, no, you have a right to this space, you have a voice, and please get accustomed to the idea of challenging your faculty, because that's what I remember as students we wanted to do, and that's what faculty is meant to be here for. In other words, when we are talking culture, I'd like to, at one level, think that the word culture is not just cultural activity. It's not just music, dance, theater, etc., etc. It's also an acculturation of how you engage with the world around you, of how you deal with their faculty, so students in the classroom, but your colleagues in the staff room, your principal in the principal's room, how you deal with the non-academic staff, the security staff, the admin staff. In my college, which has a lot of dogs that float around on campus, how do you deal with the dogs on the campus? Because we have a lot of faculty members who get very upset at the dogs being fed because they are being bred as well, and looking after the needs of the dogs and their inoculations, their shots, and so on and so forth. I think all this adds up to a sense of what constitutes cultural space. And some of this cultural space is formally organized, and one of us will sing a song and one of us will paint a painting. But a lot of this cultural space is within us, the way we look at the world and the way the world looks at us and the way we engage. What Shalini and I thought we'd do, I think the one daunting task was how we're going to put this all into 45 minutes. And as I said earlier, there are going to be gaps, slippages, and maybe some of those gaps can get addressed in the question and answer, and maybe some of them won't get addressed at all. But so be it. It's 1.5 hours of your life and our lives that we are spending together. What we thought the most efficient way of doing it is that we divide our talking into a what, a why, and a how. Understanding that our real focus should be on the how, because that's what Ashley wagged his finger at us and told us that you guys do something and can you share how you do it. And we said later on that how can we do a how unless we are also going to be able to articulate a why? Because at the end of the day, what we do and how we do it is clearly it's driven by why we are doing it. And sometimes when I look at how a theater society in a neighboring college runs and how the theater society at our college runs, I realize the difference is happening because of the why. The idea of why we are doing theater, the idea of why we are getting together and we are working in the college till about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. If you think you're coming together because you want to have fun, then you will produce a certain kind of work and you will do it in a certain way. If, however, you feel you're doing it for another reason, then your work process will change and so on. So while the bulk of our talking is going to be on the how, just a few few statements of principle at the beginning about what is it we are doing and why we want to do it, I think is in order. We'll do that and then we'll switch into talking about the how. I think I think one thing that I don't know how many of you are familiar with Delhi University, but the but still maybe the point still needs to be made. Um, it's when we step outside of Delhi University, when let's say one travels with one students to Hyderabad or to Pune or to Bombay, that one hears from other people, oh, Delhi University invests a lot in cultural activity, that as a university, it encourages cultural activity. I know all of us laugh and say, oh yeah, really? You have to come to Delhi University to find out what the truth is. But that's like saying that the grass on our side is always never as green as you may think it is when you look at it. The fact is, Delhi University has a policy on culture only in one respect, which is that it officially allows for some admissions to be done in academic courses on the basis of a talent in cultural activity A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. The university or the college is left free to decide what it considers a cultural activity worth looking at in those terms. There are similar admissions for sports. That's fully organized. Cultural activities is like the same sports admission has been also extended into culture. But apart from that, everything else is left to individual colleges. There are many colleges in Delhi University. It's a federal structure, and each college determines its own extent of involvement, investment, and support for the activity, the cultural activities that happen in their college, in their institution. Surprisingly, some colleges in Delhi University will have admissions on the basis of cultural merit, but have no cultural activity. That's an interesting phenomenon, and that itself, I think, gives you an idea of how thinking is not very clear. Why then does a college make an admission on the basis of, let's say, music, if there is no support in terms of materials, in terms of resources, and etc. for music? There are many colleges that do not allow admissions on the basis of cultural activities and yet have very vibrant cultural societies. So there is no necessary simple interface between we have cultural admissions and therefore we have profound cultural activity or very hectic cultural activity. But apart from that, every college does its work the way it wants to. As Shalini said, we come from a privileged space of both of us when we entered Kirori College had very vibrant music and theater societies. The theater society at KM dates back to even before I was born. And with my white beard, that should be very impressive indeed when you look at how old I am. The music society too is as old. So when you come into a space, you come into a space that's already structured. It has its mind. It tells you what to do. And you learn as you enter. And then you also contribute and change that place because of what the skills that you're picking up there. Uh, that may make us unfit for some kinds of sharing of knowledge with you. Because if you work in an institution that does not have this kind of cultural capital, then the nature of the challenge before you is going to be different. But I think in that regard, Shalini's experience is useful. She has worked in several colleges in the university, and she will at some time talk about working at a college where she set up a music society. And that's very special experience because I don't have that experience at all. I have an experience of interfering in my theater society, but I didn't set it up, certainly. Um, what are the things that I think we need to keep in mind? I think every educational institution says something nice about culture. Cultural activity is good. After that, if you were to ask why is it good, the institution may not be clear why it is good. But that there has to be some kind of, even if it is a token acknowledgement, there has to be some kind of some statement where the institution will say, we support culture. Now, very often supporting culture involves inviting a well-known practitioner to perform at the institution. This will be a single, advertised, well-known event, and it's good for the audience of faculty and students and administrative staff because it exposes them to culture, maybe at a subsidized rate because it'll even be free without having to buy a ticket. That's good. But that's not where we are coming from. When we talk about cultural activities in the educational institution, we are speaking of it as a place of expression, not as a place of spectating. Yes, for a college to invest in a program where someone from outside is called in, it's important, it's good. But why are we calling that person in? So here's an instance which we were just talking about. You want to call in a very high profile musician, a Bhimsen Joshi, to come in and perform at your college. It's very good. It'll get your college in the newspapers. You will get some reporter to come in. The principal will get happy. The principal will get a photograph with Bhimsen Joshi. The principal will be even happier. And staff members will also stand in the staff room and they'll have a chai and a pakoda. And it's very good for everybody. But that's, I think, and that event might take up a lot of money, depending on if you're getting him directly, but subsidized if you're getting Bhimsen Joshi through a Spick Meke or something. Whereas our understanding would be, don't get somebody so highly accomplished. Pick up a younger artist, somebody who's just coming into the place, an artist looking for an audience. Bhimsen Joshi will command an audience anywhere. But if you get a younger artist who's looking for an audience, that younger artist is willing to share more of himself or herself. And we might ask that younger artist, can you talk to our students? Can you share some tips? Shalini has a story of a...
Yeah, there was a, so while we were working at the Culture Council at the university, and therefore one had access to many more colleges. And there was a college in South Delhi which wanted to start a Speak Make program, wanted to have what we call as performers and maestros coming in and doing a music performance, a dance performance, and so on. And they had contacted the Culture Council because they wanted advice on names and how to set it up. And I, during that interaction, because the idea was if you get in people who are maestros and who are these really ace performers, as one calls them, they come in, they'll perform, they will be absolutely time bound, they will not engage with the students. There'll be no kind of dialogue or discussion that takes place. And it'll be an event which will be covered and it'll give you the publicity in terms of a college space, but it will do nothing much for the students. So the suggestion that went out from Culture Council was that it is better to be looking at the budding performers who are just coming into the space of performance, who have just completed their training, so to say. And it becomes a very nice place because the students are wanting to listen, to engage, to see a performance, and the performers are looking for venues to come in and perform. They are very scared at that point of making errors, making mistakes, and therefore they take that particular performance extremely seriously. They're also willing to talk to the students, to take up questions. And in fact, in a very valuable exchange that happened in a college in South Campus, who finally, after discussions, many discussions, maybe saw the merit of trying this out once. And they called a Basuri Vadak who had just started performing. The person went in, the performance was about an hour and a half. The discussion went on for another 3 hours. And students absolutely loved, and the performer loved the engagement. And then he asked some of the students to be a part, go to his house and sit in on his the practice sessions in the morning. And so for about 3 months, these students went over, not only people who were playing the flute, but also people who were doing sitar, also people who were going into classical vocal. And it just became such a lovely experience that came out of a performance. So that becomes a much nicer way. It does not put the financial burden on the institution. And it just becomes a very nice place for both the sides to gain. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move to something else. Um, Not just the grand one single event. And if you have to go in for calling maestros from people from outside, look at the level at which you're calling them. We've discussed that. The second is that since our focus is on self-expression, creative expression of the students, and when we are calling people from outside, it's with a view to how students will benefit. We must also remember regular activity is very important. Again, the idea that the students, just as if you call a Bhimsen Joshi once, you may also have colleges which will say, well, we are doing the one annual play, or we are having this one annual musical event. Annual events are good, but the learning curve is very limited. It's very small, it's very specific, and it's much better at KM. When I was a student, we used to have an annual production, and the annual production sucked up, let's say, um, X to the power 10 amount of money. And it took up 2 months or 3 months to do the play. And by the time that play was finished, we were all happy, fulfilled, contented, but we did one play. When I came in as a staff advisor, and people had lost out on chances. I got a role, somebody else didn't get a role. And that's it. The whole year is gone for that other student who didn't get a role. Instead, we said, why are we doing annual productions which take up so much time and so much money? Why don't we do shorter plays? Why don't we do, in the same amount of money, we could do 6 short plays rather than do one full-length play? And that 6 short plays will engage a much wider number of students. Everybody gets a chance. And you're performing many more times. Instead of having just 2 performances, you could be having 12 performances. So scaling down, that's a point, in other words, I'm making. Scaling down is very important. Institutions tend to believe in scaling upwards. But scaling down, literally, you can see the metaphor, is that you're working at the grassroots. You're going down and working amongst every single student. And remember, this is an institution where students have to be given a chance to try out self-expression. So which means that we have to be prepared not always just to be rewarding merit. We also have to be rewarding interest. So I know, for example, if at the Theatre Society, if we have to choose a play which has 4 roles and we have to choose a play which has 10 roles, we will always choose the play which has 10 roles, because it means 6 extra students get a chance to act. It also means that if you sometimes have, sometimes we're doing 2 plays. I know this has happened again and again in my college. You have 5 very good actors in a group of 50. You do 3 plays. You're very tempted to use the same 5 actors in all the plays because you want to put your best foot forward. And we would say no. We'd say, you 5 have got a chance in one play. There you go, you're off there. You can take a choice of which play you want to be in. If there are 3 plays that want you want this play, you're there. But everybody gets a chance, including those who are relatively less talented, because we are looking at culture as, this is what it means to say culture is a collaborative space. Culture is a space of self-expression. It's not to be driven by the idea of who topped the exam, who is the best actor, who is the better actor. When we say we don't believe in competition, it doesn't mean that we don't believe in going to an event which is competitive. It also means internally in your own organization, when you organize the distribution of opportunities, how competitive is that space and how shared is that space? That's a very important criteria to keep in mind. This will happen only if you have regular activities. A single one-off activity will not give you the multiplicity of opportunities required for this. The other thing that's very important, and I think with that we'll come to an end with talking about what, no more of that, is what is the nature of our cultural activity? It's not curricular. Absolutely, we've got to be clear. It's not curricular. So for example, if if Ashley was going to invite someone from the National School of Drama to talk to us, I would say there's no point. Don't call someone from a school of drama to talk to us because that is not our brief. We are working with students who are studying commerce. A student studying physics also wants to sing. A student studying history also wants to act. And the student is in the college to study history or physics, not to act. So in that sense, recognizing that our cultural action, our cultural activity is not curricular is an important definition of the way we work. It is very liberating because, as all of us know, the curriculum traps us. If you are an autonomous college that determines its own courses, but in Kirori, at Delhi University, the courses, the syllabi are centrally formed. Notionally, we are consulted, but you know what it is like when committees work. We don't frame our own courses. And we know as teachers how constrained and driven we are by the curriculum, which is not always to our liking or not of our making. Remember, when as students, we were even less in charge of the things we were studying. So what happens for us is in terms of cultural space, we say, can cultural spaces have a freedom that is denied to students in curricular spaces? It would be nice if students had freedom in curricular space. If that can't be done and that can't be managed, can we do it in a corner of the work we do, which is in cultural activity? Can cultural activity be co-curricular? So there are two words, co-curricular or extracurricular. Co-curricular sits there as an interesting hybrid space that the student is studying something which will be marked from the point of view of an examination. The student will get grades. It will be reflected in the mark sheet. But there is a part of that work which is determined in the classroom through consultation between teacher and student. Ashley, in fact, teaches one such paper at his college, Text to Performance, where I think the pieces that you pick up to perform is devised by students and teachers in consultation. Right, Ashley? Yeah, so I was waiting for your head to nod. Suddenly I thought either you had frozen or I was saying something wrong. Whereas cultural activities at college, I think shouldn't even be co-curricular because the curriculum sits on the outside, shaping the little freedom that you have. The extracurricular nature of cultural activity at Delhi University, I think, is its single biggest strength. Sometimes extracurricular can be measured in terms of loss. No one's interested in you. You don't belong to the curriculum. You don't get the same prioritizing when resources have to be allocated. Your budgets are much smaller. In the timetable, you don't get privileged space. All right, there are losses, but there are incredible freedoms to be gained because extracurricular space is valuable because students run it. Now, this automatically has an extension into the way we work. To me, in extracurricular activities, if you have a society, let's say a theater society, where the president, student, and the student secretaries and the student treasurer is nominated by a faculty member, this is a contradiction in terms. We have to have, if it's an extracurricular space, let's not have teachers coming in and deciding who does what. A faculty advisor, like we are faculty advisors, we are there to advise, not to lead. We are there to provide guidance and feedback, not to show the way, but to comment on the ways that the students have picked up. And sometimes through our experience, pointing out that they are about to fall before they actually fall. But sometimes saying, let them fall, because there is a great learning also to be had from the experience of falling and saying, why didn't I see that fall that was about to come? So in a matter of, let's say, something like office bearers, let students decide. We have a particular way of choosing office bearers through elections at my college, but that calls for detailed reading that I don't want to talk about here. And there are other ways in which we can see the value of extracurricular work, which is that there is no pressure on students of having to take an examination. I just want to share a small little story. I remember how often it used to happen to me. Every year I took exams. When the last day of my exam, when it finished, I would look at my syllabus for the next semester, pick up a text that looked attractive to me. And on the day my exam had finished at 12 o'clock, I spent the afternoon and the evening reading a text for the next, for the syllabus for the next semester, but I read it freely. I read it for myself. And I picked up a text that I thought I would like to read. It just happened that the syllabus and my taste combined. They overlapped. Otherwise, half the time we are reading things as students that we don't want to read. The number of times your children, your students have come and said, why are we reading this? Why are we studying this? The nice thing in extracurricular is the students can't complain. Because if no one can say, why am I doing this? We'll say you're the one who decided to do it. We can help you make your choice, but it's your choice, which means that you have to set the standards. You become the author and the target. You become the person doing the teaching and doing the learning. And I think that quality of ownership that comes in that space is so important. Switching to why. First point is ownership, because I've used that word to make that shift. The cultural activities that students do is done best if students are allowed to recognize that they have been entrusted with the responsibility of doing it. I think it's a very great learning space for faculty. As teachers, we are so accustomed to telling students what to do. Please don't forget when you were a student and you didn't want to be told what to do. When you felt that you had the right to be consulted, that there were things you knew, and just because you're younger doesn't mean you don't have an idea or an idea worth listening to. So that sense of ownership is very important for teachers as faculty advisors to learn to work with students and say, all right, if you want to do it, go ahead. But remember to watch out for A, B, C. The rest of it is it's your baby, it's your responsibility. It's great for students to, before they get into the big world after their education, where they are going to finally be responsible for the things they do. It's very good to find them, to give them this experience of structured responsibilities. You are there to help them if they fall, but essentially they have to do the walking on their own. What does it translate into? Into small technical things. Again, one small example. In our college, in our auditorium, the lighting system and the sound system was maintained and run by students. We have a college electrician. We have somebody who handles the microphones and the sound system for outdoor performances, etc. But the theater sound system, the music society sound system, and the theater lighting system was run by students, maintained by students. For the college, it was a win-win situation because they saved money on overtime for admin staff that would have to be paid for work that went on after college hours. For students, they learned to handle apparatus. And because they needed that apparatus, we were surprised to find that our maintenance costs went down. They went down because students looked after. It's like you looking after, it's the way we look after our own cell phones and the way we look after our own computers as compared to the computers that you use in the college computer lab, which is not your headache and not your responsibility. You're so much more worried about the keyboard when it's your personal keyboard than when it's the one inside the college lab. Being told that this is yours in functional terms, not just in a general term, is important. Yeah. And finally, the idea of working in as non-hierarchical a manner as possible. The best cultural activity is done in groups by people where everyone is equal to everybody else. Some will be more talented than others. Some will be older than others. And by old, I don't mean merely staff members. There are third-year students, there are first-year students. And believe me, the amount of pushing down that a third-year student does on a first-year student, that's my experience. I have first-year students who call me by name, but they call their third-year student by sir. And I remember asking this boy, why are you saying Keval to me and sir to him? And he says, he's my senior. And I said, so what am I, your junior? He says, no, you're a teacher. And I said, I'm getting slightly confused by this, but I can see where it's coming from. That third year student values the 2 years of gap and wants to be treated as I'm senior to you. And students who have graduated are called super seniors. Now, technically, I'm a super senior, but they say, nah, you're a teacher. Teachers are different species. Senior students and super senior students are your own species and they bite. And therefore, you have to be careful of them. So there are all kinds of hierarchical contradictions and conundrums, but we try and ensure that we make the place as open as possible. I think that's the what and the why that I wanted to talk about. The how, um, I've already spoken some. So I think what we can do now is, how much time is there left? Is some
Fine, Keval. Yeah, it's fine. We go on, please. Yeah.
Ashley, you know me
Yeah.
by now. Don't ever
Yeah,
say
don't
go on.
No, no, go on. We'll take care of this.
Okay. I thought what.
But what is the kind of time, Ashley, still if we can have some idea?
No, 20 minutes maybe more you could speak. We could keep the interaction for half an hour.
Great, great. So in which case, I thought what Shalini and I decided was that, Shalini, we would talk a bit now about actual practice. What is it that the Music Society does? What does it look out for? What are its challenges? And what are the same thing goes for theatre. What have we learned along the way to not do? What have we learned to do in terms of actual working on the ground? One was just talking broadly at the moment. Um,
Okay, so maybe you can talk of Delhi University.
I've
later.
already done that.
Fine,
I
fine.
switched to
Yeah,
talking
ठीक
about
है.
Delhi University.
Yeah, so it is a challenge to talk in terms of how, because one is trying to condense a lot of information. And maybe, Ashley, this probably goes out to you. Maybe one really needs to have detailed conversation around the process of how and what one requires more time. And maybe one can look at that when it really comes to that kind of engagement. But
As separate
yeah,
sessions
as separate
later.
sessions later. But this is just generally coming down as sharing our experiences. And as I had said in the beginning, that because one has experiences within music and theater, I will be speaking specifically about music and the journey and the challenges. And then, of course, these have to be adapted to when you're looking at different forms, different cultural forms. But broadly speaking, ideas in terms of the fundamentals of what one is speaking is going to stay common, right? So the first point which Keval had spoken about is that in Kirori College, of course, there's a very long tradition and history of these societies being there from much before, personally, when I came into college, even as a student. So a lot was settled, a lot was stable, and already the students were coming into Kirorimal for the cultural spaces. So not only for their academic disciplines, but they were actually the number of students every year, and I think Ashley would know that the number of students who come into KM or Stevens for their theater, for their music is phenomenal. And not to say that the academics doesn't pull them, but then there's that kind of a cultural history to speak of. So when I came in as a student and then later as a faculty, there was a lot already in place. But initially, when I had started my career, one of the colleges in West Delhi, which is Shivaji College, they did not have a music society. And when I went there to teach chemistry, um, because I was a part of the music society at Kirorimal College as a student, I was asked by the principal if I could formally start a music society. And I know how difficult that thinking process was, because in Kirorimal College, one took for granted certain questions that suddenly sprung up when starting a music society. So, for example, what do you look at? Do you look at solo or do you look at choral? And that was an easy question as far as I'm concerned, because choral any day, because of what one has already, Kevin has spoken a lot about, the idea of collaborative. The societies, this cultural form, the collaborative coming together, and the power of that is far, far, much, much more in terms of what the team learns together, in terms of interaction, And in terms of even the cultural form, the value to that is far, far greater than when you're performing solo. And that is an idea which is normally misunderstood. One always privileges a solo musician to a group. And I have spoken to a number of people and they say, well, group is simpler, which is absolutely wrong. Group singing, choral singing is far more tougher because it requires blended singing. It requires singing together. It requires pitch modulation of a very different kind. So the training, the output is of a very, very different kind. And that is something that you only do in an institution. Because when you're singing outside, you only do solo. So the coming together and finding that voice which will come into a group only happens in educational institutions. So that actually question was an easy one as far as I'm concerned. The second question in terms of which form to pick up. So when I know when I'd started working on paper in terms of what the society should be like, I was thinking that we should probably have a wing which looks after Indian classical and Indian light. Then we should have something for folk. Then we should have something for Western classical, Western light and so on. And it actually completely failed on ground. Because when you're starting a society, rather than diversifying into multiple forms, one wants to focus. So I know when one went in, then one said, no, then let's start with just the Indian wing. And the next question, which is again now a question which brings me back to what we do at Kirori, which becomes a central part, is how do you audition? How do you bring in students? So every year, because the students are with us only for 3 years, and I assume that's the case for you as well, because an undergraduate program is for 3 years. The student incoming, going out every 3 years, or rather every year, you have a different group you work with. So you have to have a teacher engagement or a group of teachers, which is a constant. And you move on into the auditioning. Now, as Keval has already spoken about, we have cultural admissions. So we give out admissions for their cultural merit, right? But we also take general admissions. So we have students who come in through their, through their marks and whatever, and they join the program, they join their discipline, and then if they want to still be a part of the cultural society, we have auditions at a later stage for them. But the audition process remains centrally the same because one is looking at choral. One is looking at these students coming in not for their solo expertise. The audition process, the structuring to what we are looking at in the audition is very clearly thought of. And that goes out as something that I think needs to be thought of in any form that one is auditioning in. What are you really looking at? Because in music, one is looking at the voice quality, one is looking at their pitching ability, one is looking at their holding notes, and one is looking at their holding tempo. But that's not all. One is looking at capability. One is looking at how well they're going to blend in, how well they're going to be adaptable. And in many cases, in actual audition process, I know the number of times one has privileged maybe a much more adaptable voice in case A to a slightly better voice in case B, because that is going to fit into a society, become a choral voice in a far better way than the first one, right? So that is one part of it. Would you like to add something to this?
No.
No, okay, as thought. Yeah, so that is one part of it. So once this kind of a rigorous audition, and personally, I'd like to talk a lot more about it, but because one is kind of looking at time and fitting in many ideas, but this is the central idea of how structured your audition is, and then therefore the talent that you bring in.
I'd like to just say one word about auditions. Very often, the clarity of the work we do lies in the clarity of the words we use. It's at the end of the day, our politics is also very closely linked with our vocabulary. And if you're articulating, if you're speaking about what you're doing, has a sense of a value structure that is not relevant to your work, you will end up doing the wrong kind of work. So, for example, the Delhi University's stated position is that students take admission into colleges in disciplines of their choice according to the marks they have got in their school board exams. These are called academic merit admissions. However, some students can be granted a lowering of the academic requirement if they show talent in sports or they show talent in culture. In other words, every single cultural admission into college is actually a discounted academic admission. That cultural student, in other words, gets the feeling that he or she has taken admission through the back door. Not backdoor in terms of corruption, not backdoor in terms of nepotism or anything of that kind, though God knows some of that exists. But backdoor in the sense that you are now sitting in history where you were not good enough to be in history, but guess what? You sang a bit also, so come in and join the class in history. And it's been a losing battle to tell the university. At college, we managed it to some extent to say these are our students who have come in on academic merit, and these are our students who have come in on cultural merit. They are not discounted academic admissions, they are cultural merit admissions. These are students, and the funny thing, that's a really strange thing, that when these students pass out, many of them get lost in that labyrinth called alumni. Nobody ever really knows what happens to them. And when there is an old alumni association meeting and these old students come back, the students who come back and who are counted and who are spoken of because the college wants to say, oh, he's been our student and he's been our student, so many of them actually will be from sports and culture. So while the student is in college, that student sitting in the history classroom is made to feel that he or she doesn't deserve to be in the history classroom because has not come in on the basis of academic marks, but has come in on the basis of a singing ability. And it impacts the way faculty members treat such students. And I think that's something which one has been struggling. I think the strength of KM has been, as a student, I remember, well, both Shalini and I, you may choose to believe us or not believe us, but both of us have been, academically, we've done well in our colleges. And we know that if we didn't have the academic marks, we wouldn't be sitting here as teachers in the first place. But the amount of support and love that we got at KM from teachers I didn't even know. So I remember someone from geography coming up and saying, I really liked your play yesterday. And you turn around and you feel as if you are being embraced. You come around and feel as if you're being appreciated. This step-fatherly, step-brotherly, step-sisterly treatment that is very often given to cultural activity, you have to ask yourself, if you're engaging, if your institution wants to engage in cultural activity, why is it doing so? If this attitude is to somewhere start playing into a caste system of those who are academic and those who are non-academic, you are going to be having societies that will not be functioning to their full optimal potential. So I think at the level of admissions, auditioning for cultural admissions, one says you're coming in on cultural merit. We also say something else which is important. You're not getting an admission as a reward for what you have done in the past. And it's very important to keep that in mind. Yes, you will come in and you will perform and we will evaluate your performance and you will show us your certificates saying that you have been training in dance for the last 10 years. But we're not choosing you because you have been training in dance for the last 10 years. We're choosing you because we see in you a potential for the work you will do for the next 3 years at our college. I don't want to spell out what this is a very challenging statement to make, not as a reward for past merit, but as an investment but as an investment for future potential. The college needs you, which is why we are admitting you. We will look after you, we will embrace you, we will appreciate your work if you will work properly. You will bring credit to the college, and that's why we are admitting you into college. Academic admissions work differently. In academic admissions, if you're a good science student in school, your board marks show it, we will give you a science admission. It's your past that leads to the present. Whereas in cultural, we say your present is actually on an anticipation of your future. It means that the process by which you are evaluating a student in auditions is a very nuanced, very complex, very multi-layered position. And these details will have to wait for some time later.
Yeah, I think the last point before probably one can take questions is, and what I wanted to move into mainly keeping in mind music and dance, that a lot of us feel that it's the training that has to be there within the student in terms of prior training in classical music or in classical dance. And that just as an experience coming out of auditions for as long as one has been involved, that's not very true. Yes, students who are coming with training bring in something, but there are many voices and many dancers who are genuinely what one calls as voices and dance expressions that they have without going through a complete training process, that also actually become a very, very important and integral part of the society. So one in during audition, and that's what I just wanted to move into, one also keeps in mind that one doesn't really go and succumb to these kind of uh, stereotypes that one will only look at trained. Once you take in students and you bring them into societies, all our societies at Kirori College have an extensive what we call as training program or workshops where we work with what we have taken in. And you have 2 years of students who are seniors now in the second and third year, and we go through about a month or even more kind of training on the basic whatever that particular society is working with. So a dance society will work with movements, a music society will work with voice culture, not only in terms of looking at the pieces that they're going to be performing, but actually in terms of the basics. And that is what becomes one of the very important strengths of the societies at KM, right?
We also, in these training environments, two comments. One is there is faculty which is involved in training, but there's also alumni. Again, I think that's a feature. Of course, this is projecting forward, but the strength of the cultural societies at KM is because the continuity of students who are currently in college with students who have graduated, that link is unbroken. And it makes for a very different sense, therefore, of what constitutes your society. It's not just, at the moment, there are 3 years in KM, at Kirori College, but there are 20 years of students who have passed out. And they was in touch with each other earlier. They are still in touch with each other. It leads to an interesting network of a sharing of resources and skills. And when we run these training workshops, very often one would say, okay, here is this person who has gone on to Bombay and is now working in sound recording. Can you please come in and run a quick workshop for us on, for example, setting our mixers, etc., on sound? Somebody else will come in and do an exercise in scripting. Somebody else will come in and do an exercise on physical body work, and so on. As a society grows, it maintains a sense of itself, which is linked to the institution, but slowly it also starts becoming autonomous and independent of the institution. So sometimes we have to say, we are the players of Kirori College. Sometimes we are just Kirori College, sometimes you're just the players. It leads to a certain kind of seesawing of affinities and affiliation. The other point on faculty, I've heard this being said very often. I'm sure Ashley has heard it being said of him, and Shalini has heard it too, which is that our respective societies are fortunate to have faculty members like us. That, oh, you have Ashley, he's done his PhD in the theater, he was involved in performance and production, and now he's working with the Shakespeare Society. So he's there and he can give technical inputs. But in our college, we have nobody with theater skills or music skills. And this is something we hold to very strongly. A teacher with skills, but no interest, and a teacher with interest, but no skills. We are very clear what kind of a faculty advisor is required. Somebody with interest and somebody with time. I think finally, what unites all three of us, and you would possibly know, Ashley, Shalini, and I have collaborated on a project together. What unites the three of us is the amount of time we are willing to spend on extracurricular work that is beyond the classroom engagements that we are part of. If we have the time and we have the interest, we learn on the job. All of us are continuously learning. Some of us came with some training, but finally what we're doing in our colleges is a kind of work that you cannot be trained for, because you're learning it specially on the job when you're working with students. I have one point that I want, so alumni we brought up. One point that I wanted to mention. Um, I think I can speak for theater. I'm not so sure about music. I don't know music in that sense. Uh, it's very important for us to maintain a critical apparatus in the creative work that we do. We spend a lot of, we put in a lot of effort in discussion. I think a line that I like using is that it's not enough to do what you're doing. It's also important to know why you are doing what you are doing. And that self-consciousness about your work maintained as rigorously in terms of standards as possible. Be unforgiving about your own work. I remember a statement made by one of my students, and that I'd like that to be my last comment, is they had gone for a theater competition somewhere. And after the play was over, they went over to the judge and asked the judge for comments. And the judge said, "Oh, your play was excellent." And they said, "Well, that's not what we came to ask you. Can you tell us what were the flaws in our production?" And he said, "What flaws? I gave you the first prize." And they said, "Yeah, you gave us a first prize, but first prize is only a sign that we were better than the other people. It doesn't mean we were good. It just means the others were worse. Can you tell us how can we improve?" And then this one student got irritated with the judge because he felt the judge was disrespecting them by not offering criticism. I thought that was such a lovely idea. You don't want to think about our work, because to ask you to criticize our work will involve you in having to pay attention to our work, to think about it, to formulate a response. And his response was, "Are, will you stop praising us? We are very good at praising ourselves. We want you to criticize us." And they came back and complained to me saying, "Who are these judges? They think by patting us on the back and saying, 'Well done, well done, well done,' we'll get flattered. We're not dogs that you reward with a biscuit after the dog has performed a trick." I think that attitude is something which is so precious. We are doing work to the best of our ability. We know it is not the best. We know we can do better. And therefore, constantly setting up a rigorous critical scrutiny of our own ability is an important feature, I think, of valuable cultural work.
Yeah, I think actually we can take questions now. That
Right. Okay. That's wonderful. So the session was about extracurricular activities, culture, the role of culture in colleges. But I think it is also all the points are equally applicable to the institution of college, the institutions of higher learning. So those were philosophical ruminations on that. So thank you so much, Keval and Shalini. The reason why, I mean, I should maybe, one of the reasons why I've been asking Keval and Shalini to come over and sort of do some workshop and some work in Dayapuram. Somehow it couldn't happen, and now this is how it happened. So very grateful about that. Keval, you're muted. Sorry?
Record, we've always said yes when Ashley.
Yes, you have said yes, but something on the
and
other.
then he never asked us after that again.
No, that's something on the other. All right. Anyways, so one of the points about this kind of a session now is that colleges have been, the campus have shut down. They've been on the shutdown mode for such a long time. And yes, spaces have shrunk. We are all looking for new possibilities. So these traditions, that got built over such a long time, because there were very conscientious teachers, there were very spirited students, and there was a whole milieu. And it is important that we don't forget them, because memory is one of the things that is going to help us figure out what our colleges were like. Because usually students like Keval and Shalini, both of them said, it gets handed down from students, and now suddenly we don't have students with these experiences, and there might be some semblance of it from online work, but it is important we say this is what three questions that the what, the why, and the how of culture in college. College as a space, college as a space of expression, college as a space of growth, of unforgiving criticism outside all the technicalities. This is the kind of work you want to do, though you might not need to do for any technical reason. So that was an amazing set of propositions, problematic, if you like. They were, spread before us, and a college like the colleagues from Dayapuram College, who are on the job of setting up these things, be very useful. And also, we've got a lot of people from outside, from Delhi and different parts of India, and one at least from Doha joining. So there's a very nice group of teachers here, and I'm sure all of us are energized by this wonderful talk. So if there are any questions, any remarks, any observations, any experience from their own life in terms of working with students in all of these things, which makes our colleges enabling spaces of growth, spaces of losing ourselves and gaining, creating a new kind of us, that whole so-called transformative potential of college space. So please, questions, remarks, please come up now.
Hello, sir. Myself, Sita. I'm from English department. I have my question to Keval, sir, since he's a theatre practitioner. So for the last 1 year, we have been teaching online, and we as English teachers, unfortunately, had to deal theatre studies paper online for the last 1 year, especially Stanislavski's psychophysical system, Grotowski's poor theatre, and many practice-oriented modules online. So when you teach a practice-oriented paper like theatre studies paper, we need that informal classroom setup where cultural interactions and informal physical warmth among teachers and students should be there. But for the last 1 year, we have been missing that. So for teaching theatre studies paper, my question is, sir, do you find any alternative that we can find in a virtual mode, or should we compromise ourselves with that limitation?
This is so unfair, Sita. I was hoping you would have the answer rather than the question, and that would be my question.
Yes, so obviously I have, but that is for my self-consolation. I'm asking you again.
Okay, so I would love to hear your explorations, your tentative statements on this area. For the record, at Delhi University, the bigger the university, the more of a dinosaur it becomes, the slower it is to change. We do not have a theatre studies paper. We do not have a theatre. We have a paper which is like title, text to performance, which I personally, if you ask me, I think it just dabbles. It throws these words out at students so they become recognizable names. And there is a little 1 week. These are the few words. This is the vocabulary. This is the jargon. But I don't think students come to grips with it in the way that they would if work would be done, let's say, on a rehearsal floor. And I suspect from the way you're talking about your paper, it is a paper with a strong practical component.
Yes, definitely.
Component. I honestly don't know how what can one do over here in the players, which is now the Theatre Society is a place which will be closer to your theatre studies paper, though it may not have that quality of self-reflection in terms of a history of training systems, but at least some kind of work that happens between actors and performers on a floor. Struggled, absolutely struggled. What we did was we picked up a script. So we had one project that was running. We picked up a script. I set up a number of questions, asked students to think of it in terms of design, both at the level of movement and at the level of lighting or whatever else. We tried to play out a little bit of dialogue between students. But at the end of the day, even as limited a project as that, and Sita, what you're asking for is something far more complex, even as limited a project as that was hampered greatly by internet speeds. It's, I think I might be able to start thinking of a module of work if I can be guaranteed real-time transmission. But the moment there's the slightest buffering, the moment somebody is going to drop out of a connection and come back slightly later on, the moment we have to keep saying, can you keep your video off and your microphones muted because you are eating up bandwidth, we can only have one directional transmission. We can only have the worst kind of teacher talk, student listen arrangement, or one person at a time talks. If theater is dialogue, two people have to be able to engage simultaneously at a very minimum. If our throughput speeds don't allow that, how will it happen? So I've seen, I mean, there's a lot of attempt to get back theater online. And Sita, I'm talking about performance structures. Training structures are even more open-ended and exploratory, which would make it even more demanding in terms of the kind of technological resource we need in order to run it. So it's defeating me at one level. I don't know how it's going to happen. I would love to hear your own experience in this matter. I have one small experience to share. I teach drama texts in a classroom. And I find, without being conscious about it, I find that when I'm in the classroom, the act of reading out a piece of text in order to be able to analyze it and to comment on it, I tend to absolutely downgrade, deprivilege the performative element when reading out that text. I read it out blandly. I read it out without feeling. I read it out with as much feeling as is necessary to understand the meaning of the text, but not to make it into a performative piece. And when I've been asked this by students, but why do you do it? You are a person who performs. So why does the performative element not come into your teaching? I said, because this is a classroom. I have the whole avenue of the rehearsal floor available to me. So I get that quota when I'm working with theater students, but with English honors students, this is the way I'll do it. Something changed for me in online classes. And this is something that other people have also noticed. That's because I was talking to just faces on a screen who were not responding back. Many of their screens were just display photos that were frozen. I couldn't read reactions. I started compensating for the deadness that was there inherent in this procedure by becoming more performative. And I actually started enjoying my classes. So I had students telling me, students of the third year, you didn't teach us this way last year. And I said, I don't know, online is getting to me. It's got under my skin somewhere. And I'm still trying to come to grips with it. What is it? Also, I think the other aspect of online is that I'm speaking into a mirror. I'm seeing my own face in front. And I'm teaching myself. Other people are eavesdroppers. There is something so terribly solipsistic. And I think I can think of less parliamentary words to use out here. This is so solipsistic, so self-absorbed, that the performance, I find online teaching a performance, much more than classroom teaching was a performance. But who is doing the performing, for whom is it being done, is another matter altogether. But Sita, I'd love to hear your sharing of your experiences.
Sir, it was very difficult for the last 1 year. That's why I asked you a question, because I was waiting for the right person to ask this doubt. Because there are modules in the paper which is dealing with enactment from Abhignana Shakuntalam, from Merchant of Venice, scenes from King Lear, etc. But I was really wondering how we will be able to make students in groups do that, those performance. Year before the pandemic, definitely we had wonderful sessions. Thanks to Ashley sir, he bought Michael came here and he was doing a wonderful session on psychophysical system, Stanislavski's method. And Ashley sir will...
It's Mikhail. Keval knows Mikhail.
Mikhail, okay.
Sorry, Mikhail.
Yeah.
Mikhail was here and he was doing a wonderful session on psychophysical system, and students were able to see it from a performer. So if it is a physical normal classroom setup, we are we have the opportunity and we have the chance to bring somebody who's expert in theater to make them watch what is psychophysical system, and we have also an opportunity to give them chance to explore themselves and perform in group. But all these things were missing last year, and somehow I managed to finish that paper, but I was not satisfied, and still I am afraid about the paper. Definitely students have done wonderfully for the exams, they responded me like that, but still as a teacher who is teaching and dealing with that paper, I'm really dissatisfied. I really got struggled with that paper.
Yeah. I have one small comment. A Mikhail coming and doing a demonstration or a video that, or, so you have actually a live performer doing something.
Yeah, live performance. He came to college.
Yeah. So the advantage of, no, so let's imagine Mikhail didn't come to college. Suppose Mikhail was still sitting in Bombay or Moscow or wherever he is at the moment. Suppose Mikhail was on Zoom, and on Zoom with the camera on himself, he did a demonstration of the same work through a camera that he had otherwise done on the floor in front of the students who were sitting watching. There would be some loss, but not all that much of a loss. So I think when you have an instructor-instructed module process at work, I don't think online will suffer, obviously, but not to the extent that it damages the work completely. Where the damage occurs is when you want two students together to be creating a piece. And if these two students are not, like if Shalini and I are now together, we chose consciously to be in the same frame, saying that we wanted to run this as together, though we could have sat in different rooms in the same house and had our own computers on. In fact, we got worried over here. We said, are we setting a bad role model by not having our masks on? Because we're the only two people not doing social distancing and don't have our masks on. Then we said, it doesn't matter. Both of us have just recovered from COVID. So we should have actually indicated that to the group, that we are not being irresponsible at the moment. But unless two students come faced within the same frame, but if two students are in two different frames, and I've seen performances of this kind happening right now, there is such a lag, such a mismatch between the small pickups that are required. I am struggling with thinking of, but I know at the same time, I'm getting some ideas that can be work, where I would at the moment just say one thing: the camera has to be a participant. It cannot be that the participants are only the people who are caught by the camera, but the way the camera comes in, the way the angle works, the way in which I could be now, in fact, this is my performance right now, just half my face, or I change the light on myself so that the lighting of my face, which I go into silhouette or whatever else, all this has to become a feature of how we act. And then maybe we can see how we can find rhythms of actor one, actor two, camera one, camera two, four-hander setup, and see what we can do. It'll be very different from the work we did on the floor, but then this is a different environment altogether. I think if we're trying to reproduce on Zoom what we did in the classroom, we'll fail. We will have to do on Zoom what Zoom allows us to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Vikram has raised his hand. Yeah. Vikram, please. Yeah, you're muted. Vikram, we can't hear you. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello, this is Bikram Fukan from St. Stephen's College. I teach physics here. Thank you very much. This was an incredibly illuminating talk. Thank you, Keval and Shalini. I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was useful way beyond extracurricular activities. I think there are lessons in what you said for classroom teaching and every other aspect of college life. There was one thing in particular that is very dear to me, and it's a problem that I've been trying to solve for the last 25 years but haven't managed, which is the apparent contradiction between increasing the involvement and maintaining standards. And you sort of mentioned this, and I'm really interested in how you achieve this, because you seem to have achieved it in your extracurricular activities. And this is something that I've been trying to achieve in the classroom forever and never succeeded, which is how do you involve more people and yet maintain that sort of self-aware critical gaze, which allows them to accept criticism from others. Because one of my pet peeves with young people nowadays is that they want to be called awesome all the time, and I have to remind them that it's their grandmother's job to call them awesome, not my job to call them awesome. But I now want to know how they recognize this as something that can happen between them as well, because all I hear one friend saying to another is, you were awesome. So how is it that you've trained your students to accept criticism? I'd really like to know that.
You want to say something?
Yeah,
We'll
maybe,
both respond.
yeah, maybe you can go first and I'll do an
Well,
add-on. Yeah.
I have been accused by my students of having encouraged them to live in a cocoon, making them unfit for living in the real world outside. And let me just amplify. Students from Kirori who have gone to the National School of Drama, or students from here who have gone to the Film and Television Institute of India, they say when we walk in, and when we are in the introductions, they say, where are you from? And they say, we are from Kirodimal. The next question they're asked is, so is that the players? And they say, yes. And they say, move from here. Side mein baitho. We'll deal with you later. And they said, then they sit there and they watch the others being, well, dealt with, they're being ragged. They said, it's very civilized. And then we are pulled out and then we are told, so what do you think of yourself? They said, we're not given a chance. The stereotype that comes in is, oh, here are people who are a bit too intellectual for everyone's good. They talk too much, they analyze too much. They're always at it, why? And they've got into trouble. They've got into trouble because when you work on a film set and a hierarchy is there, where somebody doesn't want to be questioned, where somebody doesn't want to be criticized, where a critical comment is seen as disrespect. In the National School of Drama, they become instantly unpopular for wasting time in over-analysis. I've had friends who teach at the National School of Drama saying that what you're doing is killing the intuitive element in your actor by making him always self-reflective, by making him always aware of procedures. Why can't you just let actors be? And sure, so I've just given you two instances of where excess can easily be the outcome of the work we do. But my response to that is, listen, the outside world, we're not a finishing institute that fits you into the outside world. You have to be alert enough and smart enough to recognize whether the person in front is looking for praise or is genuinely looking for a shared comment. And be prepared to lie and say, oh, it was awesome. Bring that as a word into your own vocabulary. If you think the man in front only is missing his grandmother, then tell him awesome. And then learn to use a language of critical analysis for people who actually value it. So I said, then you actually are losing your social skills if you can't manage that.
The problem is that, I mean, you know, to the lowest approximation, there are exactly 0 people in the world who appreciate criticism. I mean, you know, you have to train them somehow to accept criticism. So I want to know what you do.
Yeah, so
I mean, there's no one who comes wanting criticism. We don't want criticism. Nobody wants criticism.
no, but yeah,
So you got to somehow make them accepting of it.
yeah. So one,
I'll just respond to that because I'll respond to students I'll tell you a story about students from your college. Since I happen to curate a festival which involves my having to look at the work of different college societies, I spend a lot of time at the Rajpal at Stevens, watching plays from different colleges. And then after that, students wait for me to come in and discuss, have a conversation with them. They are hungering for criticism. They are hungering for analysis. And one of the questions I asked them at the beginning, that you tell me what's more important for you, honesty or politeness? Because when I'm going to be honestly and analytical, I can't guarantee I will keep a watch on my vocabulary. I may end up getting angry and using language which perhaps I would have stayed out of. So I can be polite and I can be dishonest because I will then not say some things thinking you're not ready to receive them. And obviously, this is a fool's question. Which self-respecting student will say, sir, please give me politeness? They have been almost conditioned into saying, no, we can take it. Let's be honest. I find when I'm talking to them, I see from the blinking of an eye that this has hurt home. And I stop and I say, you're getting hurt. I shouldn't have said it that way. But don't you understand? And I give reasons. And as far as I'm concerned, Vikram, the most hurtful comment with evidence, I've seen students regarding it as an investment. I mean, I'm surprised by the number of times I've been brutal with students and they've said thank you, because they've seen the investment that has gone into my spending time thinking about them. The other thing I do all the time is I don't criticize without offering solutions. I think it's very easy to say this was bunkum. But then I will also say, you know, what if you had tried this? Could you have done it that way? I'm not sure it'll work, but at the moment, that seems to me to be an alternative. And that becomes then a collaborative space. So criticism leading to some speculative collaboration makes the criticism a lot more palatable. That's been my experience.
Yeah, I'd like to add on because I think, Vikram, you teach physics, right?
Yep.
And you're probably talking also about your classroom interactions.
Yep.
So
I'm talking essentially about classroom interaction.
classroom, yes. So what I've also felt as a science person, because I think it also comes from the discipline you're working with. In classroom, when I'm talking, I'm not able to do probably 100 to what I'm able to do in a music society space. That's point number one. Because the time, in terms of the time that one gets working in a society space, is far, far more. So the engagement, just sitting down, doing nothing, just listening, the feedback time, talking in terms of equals, I'm not able to reproduce that in my when I teach chemistry. Even in a laboratory setup, when one is there for 4 hours, it's very time bound because they're constantly working, they have results to produce, they have data to take, and so on. That was point number one. Point number two is I also went through Kirorimal ECA Music Society as a student, and we had on like we used to have this space in the auditorium, and just across that was players, the theater society, and
With
cable.
two green rooms. One green room was taken over by Musoc. One green room was the offices of the players.
Yeah, and music society. So when I was as a student in the music society, cable was already there as a player staff advisor. And I remember the music society students, even till now, can't handle criticism. They are the soft. So you can't say too much to them. And we were like that as students also. And you kind of criticize them, and then they will not sing for 3 months. Root jayenge, naraz ho jayenge. And we used to always see players where there used to be brutal criticism, and cable would be sparing absolutely nothing but the kind of openness of talking in terms of criticizing not only each other but also the staff advisor.
Yeah.
So the staff advisor is not out of that. In the GBM, it's absolutely brutal. So in 2000, when I came back into Kirorimal as a faculty member and then came back into the music society, because science doesn't itself lend into theater, the gap just becomes too far. I requested cable because through a collaboration on which Ashley, I, and cable worked, I saw the gap that there was in between music and theater in terms of actually working with the students. And I requested cable if I can just sit in into players, the experience of going through a year, then also attended some of his lectures and so on, because I wanted to read scripts, I wanted to understand. I had absolutely no understanding, still a long way from that. Through that, I really understood the benefit of this kind of open talking. And it's been an effort to bring that even into music, where there is a lot of time that one is sharing and all of that, but just to kind of break in. But the value, of course, is huge. And in the last 2 years, there has been some movement that's happened because I've requested cable to come into music society as well as a co-staff advisor. And therefore, this kind of talking and this kind of open talking has started, and it's taking its time to come into place, but it's very, very valuable. Is yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So any other questions, observations? Anybody else?
I don't know why. I'm sorry. Can I pick up on some people? I don't know why Noel Anthony and Sri Devi, two people who I was watching while we were talking, seem to always to me seem to have some opinion on what we were saying. I was seeing it in their facial reactions. So I was so sure that they would definitely be saying something. You don't have to have a question. Just your experience, your observation, any comment, anything you could share.
Yes, Noel and Sridevi, could you please come in?
It's I'm a theater enthusiast, so I used to take my children out for plays and all. So I was like kind of relating to your experience of, no, not a very good theater actor, but I love theater. So while I was back in Devgiri, we had a chance to, perform a play. We were doing Macbeth, and we had this chance to travel to Bharatiyar University, which is a great experience. So, the way you asked about, the way you talked about your students asking and, going to the judges and asking about comments, we too did the same kind of thing. So we knew we performed well, but we didn't get through that time. And we actually barged in and we asked the judge, what was the problem with our performance? So they were like, your English was kind of poor. So I said, okay, fine. Now we accept that we just wanted a criticism, that's all. And we came back. But it was great experience going to Bharat here. So I was, relating to that point. Okay, sir.
Yes, no,
Yes, sir. Like I was going through my memories when you talked about Kirori Ma. I was a student at Ramjas College, and definitely, and definitely the memories were going back because I was a postgraduate student. I did not get any chance to participate in theater. Whenever I go for my IA classes, the students used to roam around, and especially they practice in the law, and they make loud noises. And I feel isolated sometimes. I was not part of those societies being a postgraduate student because most of the time we were having in the department classes, right? And there were 100 students in the classroom, and we feel sometimes isolated, right? Sometimes a student from philosophy can sit in English classes, and English student can go to philosophy classes. And mostly the South Campus students come to North Campus students because they feel that that's the best students, or the best campus. And as I was going through the memories, and especially we were bringing some ideas, especially the non-hierarchical idea and the better and the best, especially when we perform a play or theater, right? The panel of judges used to come and judge them, and basis of that, they will grades and marks. Mostly in our institution, right? We don't say that why you are getting first. What is the reason, right? You say you got first, that's it, right? And you said we have to find it out the better and best. Mostly in our institution, I mean, most of the institution, after their performance, they won't evaluate and say, why did you get first? What are the faults, right? I mean, can we practice in our these kind of things in India? I mean, we were practicing these things from school education to the higher education, but I haven't seen them anyone saying after getting first, well, this is your flaws. These are the advantages you had after you play. Even my students from English department went for the colleges and they have got the first prize, but they have no idea why they have got first. Still, they ask me, sir, why do we get first? I know what are the flows they had before their performance. I was there with them for the editing team and before their performance. I know what are the flows, but they were asking me, sir, why did we get first when we went to some other colleges? So, do you think that can we practice those elements in our institutions nowadays?
I will. Can I? Do I have time to respond, Ashley?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Noel, I'm going to again tell a story, which I think is going to be in a form. It's a response to the question you raised, the memories you have, the problems you've experienced, and the question you've raised. But it's not directly an answer. Take the answer out. It's
Sure.
also in a sense touching upon a subject that Vikram was just speaking about how do you create a climate of analysis and criticism and don't push students away into a place of hypersensitivity and they can't handle criticism and so on. We run a theater. We used to run a theater festival, very unimaginatively called Theater Fest. Yeah, but there was something we've been very unhappy with this. You see, for the larger part, if you're a theater group in Delhi, if a theater society in Delhi University, for a larger part, your performance opportunities are in competitive environments. Different colleges hold festivals, and then there's a theater competition, and then the usual thing, all of you know about it. There is a judge, sometimes a panel of judges, sometimes just a single judge, and then there are prizes, first, second, third, etc., etc. Some of these organizations take themselves so seriously that they don't even let the judges sit together. They think that will make the whole thing very objective. They make the judges sit with a gap between physical distancing, but this was actually critical distancing because they didn't want judges like students in an examination peeping into somebody else's evaluation sheet. And then very quickly they take the sheets and total it up and say, these are the awards, etc. I find this entire practice of cultural activity so hostile to the joy and to the pleasure with which we should be performing, whatever it is, whether music or theater or whatever. And the disrespect that is shown to judges, the disrespect that is shown to performers by putting them into a race and let's see who comes first and let's see who comes second. It took us some time in the players to devise a theatre festival that would be different. Now, firstly, it's a theatre festival, it's not a theatre competition. And we said that there will be no, we're not going to have this first, second, third business at all, no ranking. The argument that was given to us as to why this is a bad idea, and which is why most colleges do it, is an argument actually that Mahindra, that firm that makes that makes Jeeps and those cars and SUVs, etc. I remember Mahindra was the sponsor for a theatre festival at India Habitat Center in Delhi. And there was a college society, collegiate theatre component there. The collegiate theatre component, Mahindra said, should be a competition. Whereas the main theatre festival, which had groups coming from Kerala, from Tamil Nadu, from Bombay, from Bengal, etc., that was a festival. That wasn't a competition. But when college theatre groups had to come in and perform, and these college theatre groups were chosen, they were curated, they were selected. And yet, in other words, some standard was applied. And even then, when the best of the collegiate theatre groups came in, there were 6 of them, Mahindra wanted them to compete. And the reason the sponsor gave was that that is the best way to ensure standards. I was part of the organizing committee. I said, then in that case, you should get Nasiruddin Shah also to be competing against Satyadev Dubey. Don't you want standards in the main theater? No. Those are, these are students. This habit we have that students have to be trained like racehorses. They have to be made to run a race, and they have to be rewarded for someone who came first, someone who came second. It doesn't make sense. After all, in an examination, we don't have a quota system where we say only one person will get 90%, 2 people will get 89%, 3 will get 88%. If the whole class is stupendously made up of geniuses, like the NCERT very often believes, everybody will get 99.99%. And then best of luck to colleges to give them admission and to figure out how to choose them. So why can't we have a system like that? Maintain standards without competition. Is that possible? So what we devised in a theatre festival that we have is that we choose 6 plays. By looking at all the plays, it's not open house registration. You don't come in and say, we want to perform, give us an opportunity. As organizers, we choose 6 or 8 plays, and each play has a prize reserved for it. So if there are 8 plays, there are 8 prizes. There is what you can call a judge, but we call that person a discussant. There is an expert who looks at each of the plays and decides whether the play will get the prize that is allocated to it. So you can end up doing a bad performance and being de-rewarded by not getting the prize that was reserved for you. But you don't have to elbow somebody else out. If there are 6 plays and all 6 are good, all 6 get prizes. So this idea of you were good, but someone was better, means that you go back empty-handed. We felt that was so disrespectful to theatre groups. We said, this is the way we'll do it. And in economic terms, it worked out. So if we had 20,000 rupees that we divided as first prize, as so much for best production, best direction, best this, we said, no, we are not going to draw a distinction between direction, acting. You can speak about the directing that the discussant was told. You can mention an actor by name, but there's only a group prize, a production prize. And we take the 20,000 and divide it by number of teams that are there. End of story. We did something else. Only half of the event is the performance. 6 plays start at 9 o'clock in the morning. They're over by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. From 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening, the plays that are performed are analyzed. And they are analyzed first by the discussant, and then we get groups to comment on each other. This has been such a great space because teams that are until yesterday, let's say Kirori and Stevens and Dayapuram are competing against each other in X festival. But when they come to our festival, they're not competing against each other. In fact, the Dayapuram team is told, why don't you analyze the KM team? Point out what you thought were its problems and offer suggestions for improvement. That space it was very precious. We ran it for about something like 11 years. It was great to see competitors until the other day becoming collaborators by commenting on, praising each other's work, analyzing each other's work. We would ask the discussant to introduce herself or himself, saying what is the kind of theater you like, what is your standard of a good play, what are the things you look for. Because it's quite possible that the play I do today, Noel Anthony will like, but Sri Devi won't like. Because Noel Anthony does a different kind of theater and Sri Devi does a different kind of theater. Shouldn't I, as a performer, know what are Sri Devi's criteria and that they're not the same as Noel Anthony's? Because every act of judgment is not absolute. It's a conversation. You, with your attitude, Sri Devi is told that you spoke English badly. And I would say, my God, that's a terrible English language theater where speaking English correctly means you're a better actor. Yes, speech skills are important. But could we have had a theater where there's a lot of this happening in Urdu theater, where if your Urdu pronunciation, if your kha is not absolutely right, then there's something wrong in your portrayal of character. I think these criteria lack character. Yeah. Okay, this is just me talking aloud.
Okay, any other question? We have time for one more question. Comment, observation.
I think people are recognizing that if they ask one more question, this guy will start talking again. So we've got to be careful now. It's time for people's lunch and we should be winding down.
No, I'm sure. Yes, anyone?
I just had a tiny suggestion that in your why, what, and how, I think the why should come first, then the what, and then finally the how. You organize it as what, why, how. That's just a suggestion.
That's great. All right. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Right. So, great. So that brings us to the end of this. So Keval and Shalini, thank you so much, and I greatly enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone did. It was great thinking about college from a different angle, and we have a lot of. I'm sure there are a lot more questions and thoughts. There are lots of people here from across the country. Very experienced teachers, very people who are new to this. So all of them. So it's a place of sharing. And when we don't know what to do, one thing is to just acknowledge that and then talk about it and share experiences, memories, and convert them into lessons and later into strategies. I think that's one of the ways to go ahead. So your talk was very energetic, very insightful, and very effective in this context. So thank you so much. So this is just the beginning. I am we at Dayapuram and it seems everywhere. We are going to bother you. Please do come. And a lot of problems. One of the things was that one criticism I always got was my voice modulation was very bad because in the last bench nobody could hear it. So I told Keval. And Keval said, nobody has such soft voice. You don't work on your voice. That's why. So I've been, ever since that, I've wanted him to sort of give us a workshop. And I think Vikram will also really appreciate that sort of, I shared this with Vikram. He said that's a great idea. I mean, there are lots of things that, we need as ideas and also skills. And, the kind of work, when I spoke to him, Keval first, I was very surprised that he started his mentoring in 1981. That to me is a long time because I was born in the same year. So, right. So, the kind of thing, the kind of energy, that the kind of insight, the kind of nuance, rigor. That Keval brings, and the kind of administrative efficiency, a sense of things, and an understanding of art and culture that Shalini brings. All of these are great assets of Delhi University. That should, I'm not from Delhi University. I didn't study there, and I came into it much later. And I was one of the people who looked at it and said, oh my God, Delhi University has this. So one gets a lot of calls every year about which college to go, where to take admission and all that. Some people who are rich, who can pay 24 lakh rupees for an undergraduate course and all, ask me about new universities that are coming up. And then I say, it has great faculty, it does, and they're doing a lot of innovative work. But one thing is the kind of tradition that DU colleges have in terms of their ECA and the kind of, the ambience, that is something that time produces. It's like healing of bonds. It is time that does the trick. It's nothing else, no medicine, nothing. So that's one thing that I always say, I would want you to figure that in, because that's such an important thing. So I think this has to continue. We have to go back to it, and this also has to spread. And like we were discussing yesterday, things that NAC won't recognize, it's fine, and it won't be recorded anywhere. But yes, we've lived through it. Living cannot be postponed. So, one thing Corona should tell us is that, we will get this and we'll get a great career and we'll make a lot of money and all of that. But it's all, unsure. So when you're doing it, it is important to learn with all your 5 sensory organs. And that's one thing that I take from this session and lives of people like you. Thank you so much. So thank you. And more session. We're looking forward to more sessions later.